Without a place to live, they decided to stay in the abandoned Indigenous hut. But as night fell, Jennifer Harper held the baby tighter as she walked along the dirt road, her other 4 children dragging their feet beside her. The eviction had happened that morning, when the owner of the small apartment on the outskirts of Fresno lost patience with the 3 months of overdue rent. That's when they spotted the circular straw structures on the horizon. The huts seemed empty, forgotten by time, and Jennifer felt a pang of hope mixed with despair. She had nowhere to go with 5 young children, and night was falling quickly in the Central Valley. "Mom, can we sleep there?" asked 8-year-old Tyler, pointing to the largest structure. Jennifer looked around. There were no signs of life, only the wind whispering through the dry straw. The decision was made by exhaustion and necessity. Carrying 1-year-old Emma in her arms, she guided 6-year-old Ethan, 5-year-old Olivia, 3-year-old Mason and Tyler to the entrance of the hut that seemed in the best condition. The interior was simple but clean, smelling of dried herbs and earth. Some mats were piled in a corner, along with clay pots and some utensils that seemed unused for a long time. Jennifer spread the mats on the floor and settled the children, who soon fell asleep exhausted from the long walk. She stayed awake watching her children sleep, thinking about how she had reached this point. With a degree in business administration, she had worked at an accounting firm until the small company closed during the pandemic. Her husband had abandoned her when he learned of the 5th pregnancy, leaving her alone with the bills and responsibilities. The last 2 years had been a constant struggle against unemployment, lack of resources, and prejudice for being a single mother with so many children. The savings ran out quickly, and temporary jobs weren't enough to support the whole family. When she finally managed to fall asleep, Jennifer was awakened by low voices outside the hut. The sun was rising, painting the sky in orange hues that blended with the arid landscape. The voices were getting closer, and she realized they were speaking a language she didn't fully understand, though some words seemed familiar. "Tyler, wake up quickly," she whispered to her oldest son, shaking him gently. The boy opened his eyes frightened, but Jennifer signaled for him to be quiet. The voices were very close now, and she could distinguish at least 3 different people talking in a serious tone. One of them, a woman with a deeper voice, seemed to be giving orders. Suddenly the entrance to the hut darkened with the silhouette of a tall, imposing woman. Braided grey hair, colourful traditional clothing, and a gaze that cut like a blade. Behind her, 2 men also dressed traditionally watched the scene with serious expressions. "What are you doing here?" asked the woman in English, but with a heavy accent Jennifer couldn't identify. Jennifer stood up quickly, holding Emma in her arms and signaling for the other children to stay behind her. Her heart was beating so hard it felt like it would leap out of her chest. We didn't know this was owned," she stammered, trying to find the right words. "We lost our home yesterday and had nowhere to go with the children." The grey-haired woman looked her up and down, then turned her gaze to the 5 children hiding behind their mother. She spoke quickly with the men in the language Jennifer didn't understand, and the tone of the conversation seemed increasingly agitated. "This is sacred land of the Miwok people," said the woman, turning to Jennifer with authority. "You cannot stay here. You must leave now." "Twice, please, ma'am." Jennifer took a step closer but stopped when she saw the warning look in the woman's eyes. "We just need a place to spend 1 more night. I promise we won't touch anything. We won't bother anyone." "My name is Patricia Sullivan. I am the chief of this village," said the woman, straightening her shoulders. "And I say again, you must leave. This cabin belongs to our ancestors. It is no place for strangers to sleep." Tyler approached his mother and took her hand. The other children began to cry softly, frightened by the situation and by the hunger they had been feeling since the day before. "Mrs. Patricia," tried Jennifer, her voice trembling slightly, "I understand we are trespassing, but we have nowhere to go. We can stay just for tonight, look for work in the city, get some money." "It is not a matter of a day or a week," interrupted Patricia. "It is a matter of respect for our traditions. This cabin was built by my great-grandfather. Every stone, every piece of straw has sacred meaning for our people." One of the men accompanying Patricia whispered something in her ear, pointing to the children. Jennifer noticed he seemed to be arguing in their favor, but the chief shook her head, no. "You have 1 hour to gather your things and leave," said Patricia firmly. "I cannot allow you to stay any longer." It was at that moment that Mason, the 3-year-old boy, staggered and fell to the ground. Hunger and exhaustion had taken their toll, and the child fainted right in front of the adults. Jennifer ran to him, leaving Emma in Tyler's arms. "Mason, my son, wake up," she said, gently shaking the boy. "Wake up, Mason." The older man accompanying Patricia quickly approached and knelt beside Jennifer. His experienced hands touched the child's forehead and checked his pulse. Dear listener, if you are enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we are just starting out. Now continuing, "It's just hunger and exhaustion," he said to Patricia in a low voice. "The child urgently needs water and food." The elder, who introduced himself as Elder William, took a gourd of fresh water he had brought with him and moistened Mason's lips. The boy slowly opened his eyes, still confused and weak. "Thank you," said Jennifer with tears in her eyes. "Thank you so much, sir." Patricia watched the scene with an expression that had subtly changed. The sternness was still there, but something in the way she looked at the family had shifted. She spoke again with William in her native language, and this time the tone was lower, more thoughtful. "The child needs to eat," said William to Jennifer, ignoring Patricia's warning look. "I will fetch something from my house." "No, thank you," replied Jennifer, trying to stand up with Mason in her arms. "We don't want to be any more trouble. We'll leave right now." But Mason was too heavy for her weak arms, and she almost stumbled, trying to carry him along with Emma. Tyler ran to help his mother, but his small hands couldn't support his brother's weight. "Sit down," ordered William kindly. "The child cannot travel in this state." Patricia walked a few steps away and spoke with the third man in the group, whom Jennifer realized was younger, perhaps the chief's son. The young man gestured and seemed to be arguing vehemently, pointing at the family. "Mom, this isn't right," he said in Portuguese, loud enough for Jennifer to hear. "They are small children, they can't be thrown out like this." "Brandon, you don't understand the implications," replied Patricia, also in Portuguese. "If we start allowing non-natives to occupy our sacred lands, where will it end? It's not occupation, Mom. It's a humanitarian emergency. Look at the state they're in." Jennifer pretended not to be paying attention to the family discussion, but each word made her feel smaller. She didn't want to be the cause of conflict between mother and son. She didn't want her presence to bring problems to those people. William returned a few minutes later, carrying a basket with fruit, cassava bread, and a bottle of water. Without asking anyone's permission, he distributed the food among the children, who ate eagerly. "When was the last time you ate?" he asked Jennifer. "Yesterday morning," she replied softly, ashamed. "And you?" "The day before yesterday." Jennifer lied. In truth, she hadn't eaten in 3 days, leaving all the little food they had for her children. William observed her for a moment and then offered a piece of bread to her as well. Jennifer hesitated, but accepted when she realized he wouldn't take no for an answer. The food brought life back to Mason, who sat up and began playing with some twigs on the ground. The other children also seemed more animated, and Emma even smiled at William when he made funny faces at her. "Where did you come from?" asked Brandon, sitting down next to the children. "Fresno," replied Tyler, who had always been the most talkative in the family. "Our house went away because Mom didn't have money to pay." "And your father?" "We don't have a father," Tyler said simply. "He left when Emma was born." Jennifer felt her cheeks burn with shame. It was always like this when the subject of the father's absence came up. People judged her, questioned her choices, as if she had control over another person's decisions. Patricia approached and crouched in front of Jennifer. Her eyes, which before had seemed hard as stone, now showed a complex mix of emotions. "What is your name?" she asked. "Jennifer Harper," she replied, finding the courage to look directly into the chief's eyes. "And what work do you do, Jennifer Harper?" "I have a degree in business administration, but it's been hard to find a job. I work whatever comes up. Cleaning, kitchen work, sales, anything honest." Patricia studied Jennifer's face for a long moment. There was something familiar in those features, in the way she held her head high, even in adversity, in how she instinctively protected her children. "You can stay until tomorrow morning," she said finally, "but only one night." Brandon smiled openly, clearly pleased with his mother's decision. William nodded approvingly, as if this were the only correct decision possible. "Thank you very much, Mrs. Patricia," said Jennifer with sincere gratitude. "I promise we won't cause any trouble." "I'll have Brandon bring more food and some blankets," said Patricia. "But tomorrow morning you need to leave." After the three of them left, Jennifer allowed herself to cry for the first time since she had been evicted. Tears of relief, gratitude, and still a bit of fear for the uncertain future. "Mom, why are you crying?" asked Olivia, the 5-year-old girl. "Did we do something wrong?" "No, my dear." Jennifer wiped her tears quickly. "Mom is crying because we're happy. These good people are letting us sleep here tonight." "And tomorrow?" "Tomorrow Mom will find a way," replied Jennifer, with more confidence than she truly felt. Brandon returned an hour later carrying blankets, more food, and some simple wooden toys he had carved. The children were delighted with the gifts, and he spent some time playing with them and teaching traditional games. "My mother seems angry, but she has a good heart," he said to Jennifer. "She's just worried about the responsibilities of leading our village." "I understand," replied Jennifer. "We don't want to cause problems for you, we were just desperate." "How did you get here?" "These lands are quite far from the main road." Jennifer explained how they had walked for hours, following a trail that seemed abandoned, guided only by the need to find shelter. Brandon listened attentively, and his expression became thoughtful. "That trail you followed, and does it pass by a small reservoir and then by 3 large stones in a triangle shape?" "Yes, exactly," confirmed Jennifer. "How do you know?" "It's the trail of the ancients. My great-grandfather used to say it was made by one of our people who left the village a long time ago. He said that one day someone from his family would return, following the same path." Jennifer felt a strange shiver run down her spine. It must be a coincidence, but something about that story unsettled her in a way she couldn't explain. "Has your family always lived in Fresno?" asked Brandon. "No, actually I was born in Bakersfield, further inland. My grandmother, who raised me, always said the family had indigenous roots, but I never knew the details. She passed away when I was 15. Brandon looked at her with renewed interest. "What was your grandmother's maiden name?" "Dorothy." Jennifer paused, trying to remember. "Dorothy Campbell, I think." "Why do you ask?" Before Brandon could answer, agitated voices began to come from other parts of the village. They left the cabin and saw people running toward the center of the community, where a large bonfire was being lit. "What's happening?" asked Jennifer. "It's an emergency meeting," explained Brandon, looking worried. "Something important must have happened." "You can come with me," he said, after hesitating for a moment. "Perhaps it's better you understand what's going on since you're here." Jennifer picked up Emma and followed Brandon with the other children. The village was larger than she had imagined, with about 20 cabins scattered around a central area where roughly 50 people of all ages were now gathering. Patricia was at the center of the circle, speaking intensely with a man in a suit who clearly did not belong to the community. The man was gesturing and showing some papers, while Patricia shook her head negatively. "He's the lawyer for the mining company," whispered Brandon to Jennifer. "They've wanted to buy our land for years." "Buy it for what?" "Clay and other mineral extraction. They say they'll offer us a lot of money and houses in the city, but it means the end of our village, our way of life." Jennifer watched the discussion with growing understanding. The tension in Patricia's voice, the worried expressions of the residents, the lawyer's insistence, all painted a very familiar picture for someone who had worked in accounting and witnessed questionable deals. The lawyer finally withdrew, but not before making it clear he would return with a final, irresistible offer in 3 days. Patricia addressed the community in her native language, and Jennifer could tell from the body language that the news was not good. "She's explaining that the pressure is increasing," Brandon translated discreetly. "The company is offering a lot of money, more than our village could earn in decades with crafts and cultural tourism. And some people are tempted to accept. Some of the younger families, yes. They see the money as a chance to give their children a college education, to have comfort in the city. Jennifer felt a pang of recognition. She herself had faced similar dilemmas about leaving her hometown in search of better opportunities. The difference was that for her, there wasn't a 1,000-year-old cultural heritage at stake. After the meeting, the families began to disperse into small groups, talking quietly among themselves. Jennifer noticed she was being observed with curiosity by some people, but most seemed respectful and welcoming. An elderly woman approached and began talking with Brandon, occasionally glancing at Jennifer and the children. The conversation was in the Indigenous language, but the tone seemed friendly. "Aunt Barbara is asking if you like the food that the elder brought," translated Brandon. "She wants to know if the children have any allergies or need anything special." "Tell her we are very grateful for everyone's kindness," replied Jennifer. "The children will eat anything. They're not picky." Barbara smiled and said something more to Brandon, who seemed surprised by the response. "She said, 'You have the air of family,'" he translated. "She asked if you know how to make anything with your hands." "Well, I know how to cook, clean, organize things. Why does she ask?" Brandon talked a bit more with Barbara before answering. "She said if you knew how to work with clay, you could teach your daughters. Our village is known for pottery, but we are losing our younger artisans to the city." Jennifer looked at Olivia and Emma, wondering if they would be interested in learning a traditional skill. In fact, Olivia had always liked playing with Play-Doh and clay when they could afford to buy it. "I can try to learn and teach them," she said. "I don't know anything about pottery, but I'm willing." Barbara smiled broadly when Brandon translated the answer. She said something that made Brandon laugh and shake his head. "She said you are welcome to learn, but that your daughters will probably be better students than you," he translated. "She says children's hands are freer of bad habits." "She's right," laughed Jennifer. "I've always been better with numbers than with handiwork." As they talked, Jennifer noticed Patricia watching her from a distance. The chiefess approached slowly as if making a difficult decision. "Brandon, take the children to play with the other boys," she said when she came near. "I need to talk with their mother." Brandon hesitated for a moment, clearly curious about what his mother wanted to discuss, but obeyed, taking Tyler, Ethan, Olivia, and Mason to join a group of children playing near the river. "Keep Anna with me," said Jennifer, when Patricia made a gesture that the baby could go too. "You prefer to keep her with you?" asked Patricia. "It's just that she still nurses and she gets fussy if I'm away too long." Patricia nodded in understanding. They walked in silence to a stone bench under a leafy tree, from where they could see the children playing but had privacy to talk. "Brandon told me you mentioned your family has Indigenous roots," began Patricia. "Yes, my grandmother always said that, but I never had details. She was very private about the family's past." "And was her name Dorothy Campbell?" "That's right. Did you know her?" Patricia was silent for a long moment, looking at the horizon where the sun was beginning to set. "That name is familiar. Very familiar," she said finally. "I need to check some things in the village records." "Records?" "We keep oral and written records of families who left the village over the years. Some left through marriage, others through conflicts, others out of economic need." Jennifer felt her heart race. Could it be that her family really had connections to that village? "If you find anything, would you tell me?" "Yes," replied Patricia, but her voice held a cautious tone. "But you need to understand that knowing the past sometimes brings responsibilities in the present." "What kind of responsibilities?" "That depends on what we find." Anna began to get restless in Jennifer's lap, and she realized it was time for the baby's evening feeding. Patricia noticed the child's discomfort. "Go take care of her," she said. "Tomorrow we continue this conversation." But when Jennifer got up to go, Patricia gently held her by the arm. "One last question. Did your grandmother know how to make anything special with her hands? Crafts, sewing, something like that?" "Pottery," Jennifer replied immediately. "She made beautiful pots and vases. I still have some at home. Well, had. I lost everything in the eviction yesterday." Patricia's expression changed completely. Her eyes widened slightly, and she let go of Jennifer's arm as if she'd been shocked. "Pottery? Are you sure?" "Absolutely. It was her hobby, But she made such beautiful pieces that she sometimes sold them at the town market. Why do you ask? Go back to the cabin, said Patricia, clearly shaken. Tomorrow we'll talk in more detail. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing, Jennifer returned to the cabin, puzzled by Patricia's reaction. Why had the mention of pottery caused such an impact on the chief? And what were these records she mentioned? The children returned shortly after, excited from playing and talking about the new friends they'd made. Tyler was particularly enthusiastic. Mum, Connor taught me how to make a slingshot, he said, showing the object made from branches and rubber strips. And Chloe taught me a song, said Olivia, starting to hum a soft melody in the Indigenous language. That's wonderful, my children, said Jennifer, trying to focus on the children's joy despite her concern about the conversation with Patricia. Ethan, always the most observant despite his 6 years, approached his mother. Mum, why did the important lady look sad when she was talking to you? I don't know, son. Sometimes adults get worried about things children don't need to worry about. But you look worried too. Jennifer smiled and hugged Ethan. He had always been able to read her emotions with disconcerting accuracy. I am a little worried, yes, but it's nothing you need to worry about too, okay? That night, Jennifer took a long time to fall asleep. Patricia's questions echoed in her mind, mingling with fragmented memories of her childhood with her grandmother. She remembered how Dorothy always grew melancholy when working with clay, as if each piece carried a deep longing. She also remembered how her grandmother sometimes murmured strange words while working, words she now recognized as possibly being of Indigenous origin. There was also that time when, at 12, Jennifer had asked about her grandmother's father. Dorothy had remained silent for a long time, then said only, "Some stories are too heavy to carry, girl. It's better to leave them buried." At the time, Jennifer had interpreted this as a reference to some family tragedy. Now she wondered if there wasn't much more behind those words. She was awakened early by low voices outside the cabin. This time, however, they didn't sound like people discovering an intrusion, but rather like people talking normally. She carefully went out, leaving the children sleeping, and found Brandon and William organizing some materials near the entrance. "Good morning," she said softly, so as not to wake her children. "Good morning, Jennifer," William replied with a smile. "We brought supplies for you and the children to bathe in the river. Aunt Barbara also sent clean clothes." "That's very kind, but you didn't need to trouble Aunt Barbara." "It was no trouble," said Brandon. "Actually, she was very excited to help. She said it's been a while since she cared for young children in the village." "Why? Don't families here have many children?" "They do, but many move to the city when the children are young," William explained sadly. "They want their children to have access to school, hospitals, opportunities the village can't offer." "And they don't come back?" "Some return when they become adults, but it's not the same anymore. They've lost the connection to the traditions, the language, the ancestral way of life." Jennifer understood better now the weight of the decisions Patricia was facing. Preserving the traditional culture versus providing modern opportunities for the youth was a dilemma with no easy solutions. "Where is Mrs. Patricia today?" "She went to town early, had some business to take care of," replied Brandon. "But she said she'd be back before noon to talk with you." Jennifer woke the children and took them to bathe in the river, which was just a few minutes' walk from the cabin. The water was surprisingly clean and cool, and the children were delighted by the novelty. Olivia, the 5-year-old girl, showed a natural ease for swimming that surprised everyone. Within minutes, she was playing in the water as if she'd been born in the river. "Your daughter has a knack for water," commented a young woman who was washing clothes nearby. "It's rare to see someone so small adapt so quickly." "She does," agreed Jennifer proudly. "She's always been fearless." "My name is Ashley," said the young woman, introducing herself. "I'm Aunt Barbara's daughter." "Nice to meet you, Ashley. Your mother was very kind to us yesterday." "My mother has a theory about you," said Ashley with a mysterious smile. "What kind of theory?" "She says you were guided here by the spirits of the ancestors. That it wasn't a coincidence you found exactly the cabin of Brandon's great-grandfather." Jennifer felt that strange shiver again. Every time someone mentioned connections to the past, she felt as if she were on the verge of discovering something important, but didn't know exactly what. "Do you believe in that sort of thing?" she asked Ashley. "Our culture is full of stories about people who were lost and found their way home by following signs from the ancestors," replied Ashley. "Sometimes whole generations pass before the return happens." After the bath, Jennifer dressed in the clean clothes Barbara had sent. They were simple but comfortable clothes, and they had a pleasant smell of herbs she couldn't identify. Brandon was waiting for them at the cabin with a generous breakfast: fresh fruit, tapioca, goat cheese, and strong coffee that brought energy back to Jennifer's tired body. "Mother left a message for you," he said while the children ate. "What message?" "She wants you to come to her house when you finish eating. She said she found some things in the record she needs to show you." Jennifer's heart raced. Could it be that Patricia had actually found some connection between her family and the village? "Can you stay here with the children?" she asked Brandon. "Of course. Elder William is going to teach them some traditional games." Jennifer followed Brandon's instructions and easily found Patricia's house. It was one of the larger buildings in the village, with several interior rooms and decorated with traditional crafts of impressive beauty. Patricia greeted her at the door with a serious expression, but not hostile like the day before. "Come in, Jennifer. We have much to discuss." The main room of the house was spacious and airy, with mats on the floor and colorful cushions scattered around a low wooden table. On the walls, shelves displayed pottery that immediately caught Jennifer's eye because of its resemblance to her grandmother's work. "These pieces are beautiful," she commented. "They were made by my great-grandmother," said Patricia, watching Jennifer's reaction carefully. She was considered the best potter in the village. "The style is very similar to the pieces my grandmother used to make." "Yes, I noticed that yesterday when you mentioned your grandmother's pottery." Patricia went to a shelf and picked up a carved wooden box. From inside it, she took out some old papers and a notebook with a worn leather cover. "These are our village's family records," she explained. "We've kept notes on births, marriages, departures, and returns for over 100 years. She opened the notebook to a marked page and showed it to Jennifer. The writing was elaborate, done in ink that had faded with time but was still legible. "This entry is from 1954, said Patricia, pointing to a specific paragraph. "It says that Robert Campbell, son of Harold Campbell and Margaret Sullivan, left the village to marry a white woman from the city. He took his 8-year-old daughter, Dorothy Campbell, with him." Jennifer felt as if the ground had vanished beneath her feet. The name, the age, it all matched perfectly with the information she had about her grandmother. "But that would mean that you are the great-granddaughter of Harold Campbell, my great-great-grandfather," Patricia completed, "and that your blood is as Miwok as mine." Jennifer's hands trembled as she held the notebook, trying to process the information. Her whole life she had felt as if she didn't completely belong anywhere. Now she discovered there was a historical reason for that feeling. Why did my grandmother never tell me this? "Read the rest of the entry," Patricia said softly. Jennifer continued reading. The text explained that Robert had been expelled from the village for refusing to accept an arranged marriage and for falling in love with a non-Indigenous woman. The decision had divided the community, and the expulsion was decided by a narrow margin of votes. "He was banished?" asked Jennifer, her voice choked. "Yes, and it was decided that any of his descendants could only return if the community voted unanimously for acceptance." "And now?" Patricia closed the notebook slowly. "Now we have a complex situation. You came here out of need, not out of knowledge of your roots. This changes the traditional circumstances of a return. And what does that mean for me and my children? It means that for the first time in 70 years, we have to discuss the return of a banished descendant." Jennifer stood up and walked to the window, looking at the village where her children played carefree. Everything seemed too surreal to be true. "I don't even know what to say," she admitted. "Yesterday I was just a desperate mother looking for shelter. Today I discover this might be the place my family originally came from." "The ways of the ancestors are mysterious," said Patricia. "Perhaps it wasn't a coincidence that you found precisely the cabin that was built by your great-great-grandfather. What happens now?" "Now I need to call a general assembly of the village. All the adults need to vote on whether to accept your return and that of your children as members of the community. And if they vote no? Patricia hesitated before answering. Then you will have to leave as was originally planned. Jennifer felt a lump in her throat. In less than 24 hours, she had gone from a hopeless refugee to a possible heir of an ancestral tradition, and now she faced the possibility of a new rejection. When will this vote be? Tomorrow night. I need time to explain the situation to the whole community and for people to reflect on the decision. And what should I do in the meantime? Just keep being yourself. Let people get to know you, let them see who you really are. The decision shouldn't be based only on blood, but also on character. Jennifer returned to the cabin with her head spinning. How would she explain to the children that they might have roots in that place? How would she prepare for a vote that would decide the family's future? She found the children playing happily with William, who was teaching Tyler how to carve wood. Ethan and Mason were fascinated, learning to identify different types of plants, while Olivia played with dolls with Emma. "Mom," said Tyler, running to her, "the elder taught me how to make a little wooden fish. Look how cool it is." Jennifer examined the small carving with genuine admiration. It was simple but well-made work, and Tyler seemed very proud of his accomplishment. "It's beautiful, my son. You have skillful hands." The elder said, "If we stay a few more days, he can teach me to make other animals." Jennifer's heart tightened. Tyler was clearly growing fond of the place and the people, just like the other children. What would happen to them if the community decided they couldn't stay? "Let's see how things develop," she said diplomatically. William approached her with a warm smile. "I heard Patricia spoke with you about the family records." "Yes, it's a lot to process." "I imagine it is. Discovering roots can be both liberating and frightening." "Did you know my great-great-grandfather?" "Harold Campbell was my grandfather," he said simply. "That makes us distant relatives." Jennifer looked at him with new eyes. There was a familiarity in his face she hadn't noticed before, something in the line of his eyes and the shape of his nose that reminded her of old photographs of her grandmother. "Why didn't anyone tell me this yesterday?" Patricia wanted to be sure before revealing anything, and she wanted you to hear it from her, as our leader. "And what do you think of this whole situation?" William looked at the children playing and then back at Jennifer. "I think the ancestors have a sense of humor. After 70 years, they send back a descendant exactly when our village is facing its greatest crisis." "Crisis?" "The mining company proposal you witnessed yesterday is just the tip of the iceberg. We're losing our young people to the city. Our population is shrinking. Our traditions are fading. Perhaps you are exactly what we need to remind us why our land is worth fighting for." Jennifer spent the rest of the day observing the village dynamics with new eyes. She saw families working together on crafting, children learning the traditional language from the elders, young people adapting modern knowledge to solve age-old problems. But she also noticed the tensions. Low conversations among groups of people, divided glances when she passed by, silent debates that seemed to intensify in her presence. In the afternoon, Barbara invited her to learn the basics of traditional pottery. They sat in a covered area where there were potter's wheels and various types of clay organized in containers. "First, you need to feel the clay," said Barbara, placing a piece of moist clay in Jennifer's hands. "Each type of earth has its own personality, its own possibilities." Jennifer followed the instructions, kneading and shaping the clay without a specific goal. To her surprise, her hands seemed to instinctively know how to work with the material. "You have a natural talent," observed Barbara. "Your hands know the clay as if they've worked with it before. It's strange, really. It feels familiar, even though I've never tried." "The knowledge of the ancestors sometimes comes in the blood," said Barbara. "Your daughters must have the gift, too." They called Olivia to try, and the 5-year-old girl immediately demonstrated an even more impressive ability than her mother. Her small hands created perfect shapes, almost effortlessly. "This is extraordinary," said Barbara, clearly moved. "It's been decades since I've seen someone so young with such ease for working with clay." Other women from the village began to gather to observe Olivia's natural talent. Within minutes, the girl had created a small pot that looked as if it had been made by someone with years of experience. "Mum, can I make a little clay doll for Emma?" asked Olivia, already shaping a second piece. "Of course, my daughter." While Olivia worked, Jennifer noticed the women talking among themselves in an approving tone. For the first time since she had arrived, she felt there might be real hope for acceptance. But the feeling of optimism was interrupted when a group of younger men approached, led by a young man who looked to be in his early 20s. "Aunt Barbara," he said in Portuguese, clearly so Jennifer would understand. "Don't you think it's hasty to be teaching our traditional techniques to people who might not even stay?" "Derek, every child has the right to learn about their roots," Barbara replied firmly. "But what if they take our secrets to the city? What if they use our knowledge to compete with us in the crafts market?" Jennifer felt her face burn. The accusation was clear. He was calling her an opportunist, someone who would take advantage of the village's hospitality to later commercially exploit what she learned. "I would never do that," she said, trying to keep her voice calm. "I don't even know if we're staying, and even if we did, I would never harm the community that took us in." "That's easy to say," Derek retorted. "But you showed up here out of nowhere, on the eve of an important decision about our lands. How do we know you weren't sent by the mining company to spy on us?" The group of women fell silent, clearly uncomfortable with the accusation. Olivia stopped working with the clay and looked at her mother, sensing the tension in the air. "Look, Derek," said Jennifer, standing up. "I understand your distrust. If I were in your place, I might think the same thing, but I can assure you I have no connection to any company. I'm just a mother who lost her home and ended up finding you all by chance." "By chance," he said skeptically. "What an interesting coincidence that a banished descendant shows up right now." Barbara stood up too, clearly annoyed by the young man's attitude. "Derek, that's enough. You're being rude to our guest." "She's not our guest, Aunt Barbara. She's an invader who's being tolerated out of pity." Jennifer felt tears begin to form in her eyes, but she refused to cry in front of him. She took Olivia by the hand and stepped away from the group. "Come on, my daughter. Let's go find your brothers." She found the boys still with William, who immediately noticed something had happened. "Is everything okay, Jennifer?" "I think maybe it's better if we leave right now," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "We don't want to cause more divisions in the community." "What happened?" Jennifer explained the confrontation with Derek, and William shook his head regretfully. "Derek is a good young man, but he's scared of the changes. Don't take it personally." "But he's not wrong. Maybe our presence here really is causing problems you don't need." "Jennifer," said William gently, "all change causes resistance. That doesn't mean the change is bad." "But what if the vote is negative? What if I'm creating expectations in my children that will later be destroyed? And what if the vote is positive? Will you deprive your children of the chance to know their roots out of fear?" Jennifer looked at the children, who were clearly happy and adapted to the environment. Would it be fair to take them away without even waiting for the community's decision? "What do you think I should do?" "I think you should stay for the vote, but I also think you should use this time to show what kind of person you are, not just what kind of blood you have." "What do you mean?" "Tomorrow, the mining company returns with the final proposal. Patricia is going to need all the help she can get to analyze the documentation and understand the legal and financial implications of the offer. You mentioned you have a background in administration, didn't you?" he continued. "Yes, I do." "Then perhaps you can help your community make the best decision about its future." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing, Ubirajara's suggestion made Jennifer reflect. Perhaps there was a way to demonstrate her good faith and at the same time use her professional skills to help the village. "Do you think Mrs. Patricia would accept my help?" There's only one way to find out. That night, Jennifer sought out Patricia at her home. The chief was sitting at the table, surrounded by papers and looking worried. "May I come in?" Jennifer asked from the doorway. "Of course, in fact, I was just thinking about you. Elder William told me the mining company is coming back tomorrow with a final proposal. I'd like to offer my help in analyzing the documentation." Patricia looked at her with interest. "What kind of help could you offer?" "I have a degree in business administration and worked for several years analyzing contracts and commercial proposals. I can help understand the terms, Calculate the real values. Identify clauses that could be harmful. And why would you do that? Jennifer sat in the chair opposite Patricia. Because regardless of the vote about our staying, I don't want you to be deceived by people with bad intentions. And because if we really are family, then the future of this village is also important to me and my children. Patricia studied Jennifer's face for a long moment. All right. I'll accept your help. But you need to know this could be used against you in the vote. Some people might interpret it as an attempt to buy support. I understand the risk, but I'd rather be rejected for doing what's right than be accepted by omission. They spent the next 2 hours reviewing the documents the company had left. Jennifer quickly identified several serious problems in the proposal. Look at this clause, she said, pointing to a paragraph in small print. They offer houses in the city, but don't specify where or the conditions. They could very well give houses in troubled areas or without proper infrastructure. And this value here? Asked Patricia, pointing to a number that seemed generous. It's divided among all the families in the village, right? Jennifer did some quick calculations. That would come to about 15,000 riets per family. It seems like a lot of money for those who have nothing. But if we consider that you're giving up lands that could be exploited for decades, it's very little. How so? See, they talk about clay and other mineral exploitation, but they don't specify which other minerals. If they find something valuable like gold or precious stones, you won't have any right to profit sharing. Patricia grew increasingly serious as Jennifer explained the implications of each clause. What seemed like a generous offer was revealing itself more and more as a predatory contract. There's one more concerning thing, said Jennifer. This clause about temporary relocation during special operations. They reserve the right to evict you from the city houses if they need your labor for other projects. Would that be legal? Probably not, but the cost of fighting it in court would be too high for a community without resources. They know that. Patricia pushed the papers away, clearly frustrated. How can people be so dishonest? They know we're in a difficult situation and take advantage to deceive us. It's common, unfortunately. Big companies hire lawyers who are experts at finding legal loopholes to benefit themselves. And what do you suggest we do? Jennifer thought for a moment before answering. I suggest you reject this proposal and seek alternatives to generate income while keeping ownership of the lands. What kind of alternatives? Responsible cultural tourism, direct sale of crafts, partnerships with universities for research, even limited sustainable small-scale exploitation of natural resources. Would you know how to implement these alternatives? Not alone, but I know how to make business plans, how to calculate costs and revenues, how to seek funding and partnerships. Patricia fell silent for a few minutes, clearly processing the information. Jennifer, I need to ask a direct question. If the community votes for you to stay, would you be willing to dedicate your time and knowledge to help develop these alternatives? Yes, I would be willing to dedicate my life to it if necessary. And if they vote against you staying? Jennifer hesitated. It was a painful question, but it deserved an honest answer. If they vote against it, I would respect the decision and leave with my children. But I would still leave all the information and suggestions I've managed to gather, so you can use them if you want. Why? Because it's the right thing to do, and because my children need to learn that sometimes we do good without expecting anything in return. The next morning, Jennifer woke up early and found unusual activity in the village. People were arriving from other places, some who clearly didn't live in the community, but were welcomed as family. They're relatives from other villages in the area, explained Brandon when she asked. When we have important assemblies, all the Miwok in the area are invited to participate. Do they vote too? No, but their opinions are heard and respected. Jennifer felt even more nervous. She would be judged not only by the local community, but by representatives of the entire Miwok people. During the morning, she helped Barbara and other women prepare food for the visitors. Working alongside them, talking about traditional recipes and cooking tricks, made her feel temporarily part of the group. You season the food just like my great-grandmother did, commented one of the older women. You use the same amount of cumin and cilantro. I learned from my grandmother, replied Jennifer. She always said seasoning was a matter of feeling, not measurement. Your grandmother was wise. Food made with feeling nourishes not only the body, but the soul. Around noon, the mining company delegation arrived. This time it wasn't just a lawyer, but a group of 5 people in imported cars, including a man in an expensive suit who was clearly the executive in charge. Patricia received the group in the central area of the village, accompanied by William and other elders. Jennifer watched from a distance, but could tell from the body language that the conversation was getting tense. "I don't understand your hesitation," said the executive, loudly enough for several residents to hear. "It's an extremely generous offer. More money than you'd see in 10 lifetimes working with crafts." "Mr. Anderson," Patricia replied calmly, "our land is not for sale at any price." "Let's be realistic, Madam Chief. You're losing population, the young people are leaving, the traditions are dying. This money could secure a better future for the next generations." William stood up, clearly offended. "Our traditions are not dying, sir. They are adapting to modern times, but remain alive in the heart of our people. With all due respect, you're—" "Elder, is it?" said Anderson with poorly disguised condescension. "You're being too romantic. The world has changed. You can't live like in the last century anymore." Jennifer felt anger growing inside her. The executive's arrogance was unbearable, and his way of speaking to the village elders was disrespectful beyond measure. Without fully thinking of the consequences, she stood up and approached the group. "Excuse me," she said, addressing Anderson. "Can I ask a few questions about your company's proposal?" Anderson looked her up and down, clearly surprised by the intervention. "And you are someone who understands contract analysis," replied Jennifer diplomatically, "and who noticed some concerning points in the documentation. I don't understand why an outsider would be involved in negotiations with indigenous communities," said Anderson, his tone suspicious. "She is not an outsider," said Patricia firmly. "She is my relative." The comment clearly caught Anderson by surprise, but he recovered quickly. "Well, regardless of kinship, the proposal is quite straightforward. I don't see what could be questioned. For example, this clause about other minerals," said Jennifer, pointing to the document. "You don't specify which minerals might be found in the area. Have you done complete geological studies?" Anderson exchanged glances with his companions. "Preliminary studies, yes, but it's not relevant to the current proposal." "It's very relevant," insisted Jennifer. "If you already know there are valuable minerals in the region, then the amount offered is completely inadequate." "Listen here, ma'am," said Anderson, beginning to lose patience. "You are not in a position to bargain. This community is withering away, and our offer is the only real chance for change you'll have." "Withering away?" repeated Jennifer, feeling her indignation grow. "Look around, Mr. Anderson. Do you see a community withering away, or do you see a rich and living culture that you want to destroy for profit?" "I see a community that needs to adapt to modern economic reality." Modern economic reality doesn't have to mean the destruction of cultural heritage. There are ways to generate income while preserving traditions and the environment. "Such as?" asked Anderson skeptically. Jennifer took a deep breath. This was her chance to show that real alternatives existed. Responsible cultural tourism. This village could host visitors interested in learning about indigenous culture, participating in craft workshops, experiencing ancestral traditions. The income would be steady and growing without destroying anything. And who would organize this tourism? Who would handle the marketing, manage the finances? The community itself, with proper technical support and strategic partnerships. Anderson laughed disdainfully. "You really think you can compete in the modern tourism market without infrastructure, without digital marketing knowledge, without working capital?" "Why not?" said Jennifer, feeling confidence grow in her voice. "With proper planning and the right partnerships, it's perfectly feasible. And I suppose you would be the one to provide this technical support," said Anderson with irony. "If the community wants me, yes." The executive looked at Patricia with the expression of someone who has just understood something. "I see. So we have an external consultant here trying to convince you to reject a solid proposal in favor of fanciful plans that may never work out." "I am not an external consultant," said Jennifer. "I am a descendant of this village, and my interest is the community's well-being, not personal profit." "How convenient. A descendant. appears right at the time of our proposal." Anderson's voice was laden with sarcasm. William stood up again, this time visibly irritated. "Sir, you are being disrespectful to our relative and to our intelligence. We are perfectly capable of making our own decisions." Of course," said Anderson, clearly unconvinced. "I just hope you don't regret it when this opportunity doesn't come around again." He signaled to his entourage. "Our proposal stands until tomorrow at noon. After that, we will consider you are not interested." After the group left, a heavy silence settled over the central area of the village. Jennifer noticed several people looking at her, some with approval, others with suspicion. "Do you think I overstepped?" she asked Patricia. "I think you stood up for our community when someone was trying to humiliate us," replied the chief, "and that means a lot to me." But not everyone seemed to agree. Derek approached with some young men, clearly agitated. "Did you all see what happened?" he said to the group at large. "Because of her interference, we may have lost our only chance to escape poverty." "Derek," said Patricia with authority, "we have never been in poverty. Poverty is having no dignity, no culture, no roots, and we have all of that. Dignity doesn't pay for our children's schooling, Mother Patricia. Culture doesn't buy medicine when someone gets sick. But money earned by selling our soul doesn't bring true prosperity either," retorted William. The discussion was heating up, and Jennifer realized her presence was intensifying the conflict. She discreetly stepped away, taking the children to the cabin. "Mom, why was everyone arguing?" asked Tyler. "Sometimes adults have different opinions about what's best for the community," explained Jennifer. "It's normal, it's part of democracy." "And do you think we'll get to stay here?" Jennifer looked at her son's hopeful face and felt her heart tighten. How to explain that they might be rejected by people they had already begun to love? "I don't know, son. But no matter what happens, we will never forget the kindness these people have shown us." As the afternoon progressed, more relatives arrived for the evening assembly. Jennifer watched groups form and talk intensely, trying to guess which side was gaining support. Some of the older women came to greet her and ask about the children. Others avoided her, clearly uncomfortable with the whole situation. Brandon came to talk with her late in the afternoon. "How are you feeling?" he asked. "Nervous, scared, hopeful, all at once. Can I give you some advice?" "Of course." "At the assembly tonight, let others speak for you. Your stance with the mining company people already said everything that needed to be said about your character. But what if people want to ask me questions? Answer with honesty. Don't try to be someone you're not. Our people value truth above all." "And if the truth isn't enough," Brandon smiled, "then perhaps this isn't really the place for you. But I have a good feeling." The assembly began at sunset. Over 100 people gathered in a circle around the central fire, creating an atmosphere both intimate and solemn. Patricia opened the meeting by explaining the situation to the visitors and recounting the facts for the local residents. She told of Jennifer and the children's arrival, the discovery of kinship, and the events of the past few days. "Now we need to decide whether we accept the return of Robert Campbell's family to our community," she said. "This is a decision that will affect our future, so everyone should express their opinions freely." The first to speak was William, who told of the talents he had observed in the children and the help Jennifer had offered with analyzing the mining company documents. "This woman could have stayed quiet and just waited for our decision," he said. "But when she saw our community being disrespected, she stood by our side. That tells me everything I need to know about her character." Barbara spoke next about Olivia's natural talent for pottery and how Jennifer had naturally integrated into the women's work. "It's been years since I've seen a child with such a gift for clay," she said. "If we miss the chance to teach this girl, we'll be wasting a gift from the ancestors." But Derek and some young people expressed their concerns. "We don't question Jennifer's good faith," said Derek, "but accepting an entire family at once sets a dangerous precedent. What if other descendants show up? Are we going to accept everyone?" "Furthermore," said a young woman, "how do we know she won't change her mind and decide to go back to the city when things get tough here?" They were fair questions, and Jennifer felt she deserved the chance to answer them. "May I speak?" she asked. Patricia nodded. First, about accepting other descendants, Jennifer began. I understand the concern, but each case should be evaluated individually. I'm not asking you to open the doors to anyone who claims to have Miwok blood. Second, about going back to the city, she continued. I won't lie and say life here will be easy for us. I know there will be challenges, but I also know that in the city I was just another person struggling to survive. Here, I have the chance to contribute to something bigger than myself. And third, she said, looking directly at Derek, if you accept me, I promise my commitment will be total. It won't be an experiment or a trial. It will be my life. A visiting elder from another village asked to speak. I'd like to ask Jennifer a question, he said. If the community decides to accept you but the vote is close, how will you handle the fact that not everyone supports you? It was a smart question, and Jennifer thought carefully before answering. I accept that I can't force anyone to like me or trust me, she said. I can only demonstrate through my actions that I deserve a place here, and I understand that may take time. And what if some people never change their minds about you? Then I'll have to accept that too. In a community, not everyone has to be friends, but everyone needs to respect each other. The discussions continued for over 2 hours. Stories were told, concerns were voiced, arguments were debated. Jennifer listened to everything in silence, trying not to show the nervousness she felt. Finally, Patricia announced it was time to vote. All adults in our village have the right to vote, she said. The decision will be made by simple majority. Small stones were distributed, white for yes, black for no. One by one, people stood up and placed their stones in a straw basket. Jennifer watched each face, trying to guess the vote by their expression, but most people maintained careful neutrality. When everyone was finished, Patricia and 2 elders began to count the votes. The silence was absolute, broken only by the soft sound of stones being sorted. 43 yes votes, Patricia announced finally. 28 no votes. Jennifer felt her legs weaken. She had been accepted. She and the children had a new home, a new family, a new chance to start over. Please stand, said Patricia. Jennifer stood with the children, who didn't fully understand what was happening but sensed something important had been decided. Jennifer Harper, daughter of Dorothy, granddaughter of Robert Campbell, great-granddaughter of Harold Campbell, Patricia said solemnly. In the name of the Miwok community, we welcome you back to your ancestral home. Tyler, Ethan, Olivia, Mason, and Emma Harper, she continued, you are welcome as full members of our village. The tears Jennifer had held back for days finally came. Tears of relief, gratitude, joy, and also a little fear for the responsibility she had just accepted. People came forward to greet her, some warmer, others more reserved, but all respectful. Even Derek approached and extended his hand. Welcome to the family, he said. I hope you prove we were wrong to doubt you. I hope so too, Jennifer replied sincerely. In the days that followed, Jennifer's life changed completely. She and the children moved into a larger cabin that the community had prepared for them and began the long process of learning about Miwok traditions, language, and customs. Olivia continued to show exceptional talent for pottery and soon was producing pieces admired even by experienced artisans. Tyler became interested in traditional music and began learning to play native instruments. Ethan showed an aptitude for agriculture, helping cultivate the village's medicinal plants. Mason, despite his young age, adapted quickly to the environment and was soon speaking words in the Miwok language. Emma grew up surrounded by care and attention from the entire community, as if she had dozens of grandparents and aunts. Jennifer began working on developing the cultural tourism plan she had proposed. She studied similar models in other indigenous communities, made contact with responsible tourism agencies, and began structuring a concrete proposal. The mining company returned twice, trying to renew negotiations, but were politely refused. The community had decided to bet on the alternative sustainable development plan. 3 months later, the first group of tourists arrived at the village. There were only 8 people, but they represented the start of something new. They participated in pottery workshops, learned about medicinal plants, listened to traditional stories, and bought crafts directly from the producers. The income generated was modest, but enough to show the idea was viable. More importantly, the visitors left with deep respect for Miwok culture, becoming advocates for the preservation of indigenous traditions. 6 months after Jennifer's arrival, the village received a partnership proposal from the local federal university for developing research on traditional indigenous medicine. The proposal included scholarships for young people in the community and resources for modernizing the infrastructure without changing the character of the environment. "You see," Brandon said to Jennifer as they examined the university proposal, "6 months ago, we were thinking of selling our land to a mining company. Now we have academic partners interested in preserving our knowledge." "It was the work of the whole community," Jennifer replied modestly. "I just helped organize the ideas." "You did much more than that," said Patricia, who had arrived to join the conversation. "You brought hope when we were losing faith in our future." A year later, the transformation was remarkable. The village had become a reference for sustainable cultural tourism, regularly received researchers, and had secured a partnership with a local high school to offer bilingual education to the youth. Jennifer had been officially appointed Community Development Coordinator, a position created specifically to recognize her work. She divided her time between managing tourism projects, coordinating academic partnerships, and caring for her children. The children were completely integrated. Tyler, now 9, was fluent in the Miwok language and had composed his first traditional song. Olivia, at 6, was already selling her pottery to tourists and teaching other children in the village. Ethan helped in the community garden and dreamed of studying agronomy. Mason spoke English and Miwok with equal fluency, and Emma was taking her first steps running through the village as if she owned the place. But perhaps the most significant change had happened in Jennifer herself. The desperate woman who had arrived with 5 children and no hope had transformed into a respected and confident community leader. "Sometimes I think about what would have happened if you hadn't taken us in," she said to Patricia during one of the nightly walks that had become a tradition. "And I think about what would have happened to us if you hadn't arrived," replied the chief. "Maybe we would have sold our land to the mining company. Maybe we would have lost our identity trying to survive in the city. Do you really think you made that much of a difference? Jennifer, you didn't just bring administrative knowledge. You brought the perspective of someone who had fought in the outside world and chosen to return to her roots. That gave others the courage to resist the pressures of the modern world." 2 years after her arrival, the village was unrecognizable in terms of prosperity, but completely preserved culturally. Sustainable tourism generated enough income for all families, academic partnerships provided quality education for the youth, and the community had become a model for other villages in the region. Jennifer looked back and could hardly believe the journey she had taken. From a woman evicted with no prospects, she had become a bridge between worlds, the traditional and the modern, the local and the global, the ancestral and the contemporary. More importantly, she had found not just a place to live, but a place where she truly belonged. And her children were growing up with a solid cultural identity, something she had never had the chance to experience. On the eve of the 2nd anniversary of her arrival, the village organized a special party. Families from neighboring villages came to celebrate the success of the community transformation. Researchers from the university presented the results of their studies, and tourists who had become friends of the community returned for the celebration. During the party, William asked to speak. 2 years ago, a desperate woman arrived at our village carrying 5 children, he said to the gathered crowd. She was fleeing poverty, rejection, despair. She didn't know she was coming home. Today, that same woman is one of the most respected leaders of our community. Her children are our children. Her success is our success. Her family is our family. But most importantly, he continued, looking directly at Jennifer, she taught us that tradition and progress are not enemies, that it's possible to honor the past while we build the future, that it's possible to be Miwok in the 21st century without losing our roots. The crowd applauded enthusiastically, and Jennifer felt tears of gratitude filling her eyes. "May I speak?" she asked, when the applause died down. "Of course," said Patricia. Jennifer stood up, holding Emma, now 3 years old, in her arms, and looked at the familiar faces around her. 2 years ago, I thought I had lost everything, she began. My home, my job, my hope. I thought I was at rock bottom, with nowhere to go but down. But the ancestors had other plans. They guided me back home, even when I didn't know I had a home to return to. You didn't just give me shelter. You gave me identity. You didn't just accept my children. You made them into true Miwok. You didn't just tolerate my presence. You made me part of the family. And in return, I promise that I will dedicate the rest of my life to helping our community prosper, to ensuring that the next generations of Miwok children grow up proud of their roots, but prepared to face the modern world. I promise that I will honor the memory of the ancestors who brought me back home, especially my great-great-grandfather Harold Campbell and my grandmother Dorothy, who safeguarded our cultural heritage, even far from the village. And I promise that I will teach my children to be bridges between worlds, as we are learning to be, so they can carry our culture wherever they go, but always know they have a home here. The applause grew even more intense, and people from throughout the crowd came forward to hug Jennifer and the children. Later, when the celebration had ended and the children were asleep, Jennifer and Patricia sat outside the cabin watching the stars. "Do you have any regrets?" asked Patricia. "Regrets about what?" "About leaving city life. About choosing a simpler life, more challenging in some ways." Jennifer thought about the question seriously before answering. "In the city, I was surviving. Here, I am living. In the city, I was just another person struggling to pay the bills. Here, I am part of something bigger, more important, more lasting. And the children? Aren't you worried they might feel limited when they grow up?" "I do worry, but I also know I'm giving them something I never had. Roots, identity, a sense of belonging. When they leave here, and some probably will leave to study or work, they will know who they are and where they came from." "That is a rare gift in the modern world," Patricia agreed. "It's a gift I could only give them because you first gave it to me." 5 years after Jennifer's arrival, the Miwok village had become a national model for sustainable development in indigenous communities. Delegations from other countries came to learn about the project. Universities included the experience in their anthropology and management curricula, and the village's per capita income had tripled without cultural compromise. Tyler, now 13, had won a regional prize for a musical composition that combined traditional Miwok instruments with contemporary arrangements. He was being courted by music schools in the state capital, but had decided to finish high school in the village before making any decisions about the future. Olivia, at 10, was considered a prodigy in pottery. Her pieces were sold in art galleries in San Diego and Phoenix, and she had begun giving workshops for adults interested in learning traditional techniques. She spoke English, Miwok, and Spanish fluently, the last learned from international tourists. Ethan, at 11, had transformed the community garden into a benchmark project for sustainable agriculture. His experience with medicinal plants caught the attention of USDA ARS researchers, who invited him to participate in a youth research project. Mason, at 8, was the village's official translator for visitors wanting to learn basic Miwok words. His gift for languages was extraordinary, and he dreamed of becoming a diplomat to defend indigenous rights internationally. Emma, at 6, was learning to read and write simultaneously in English and Miwok. She was the first of a new generation of children in the village who would grow up completely bilingual from the cradle. Jennifer had been invited by the federal government to join an advisory council on policies for indigenous communities. She had also completed a specialization in sustainable development through a distance learning program from the partner university. But perhaps the recognition that made her most proud had come from an unexpected source. Derek, the young man who had initially opposed the family's presence, had approached her a few months earlier with an unusual request. "Jennifer, I wanted to apologize," he had said, "and I wanted to ask a favor too." "Apologize for what? You were protecting your community. It was your right to question." "Yes, but I did it disrespectfully, and I was wrong about your intentions." "And what's the favor?" "I wanted you to be the godmother at my wedding. You have become a role model for female leadership for our generation, and it would be an honor to have your blessing." The request had deeply moved Jennifer. It represented not just acceptance, but recognition that she had truly found her place in the community. On the day of Derek's wedding, held according to all Miwok traditions, Jennifer looked around and saw her life reflected in the familiar faces. Children she had helped teach, young people who had benefited from the projects she coordinated, elders who had become her advisors and friends. She also saw visitors who had become defenders of the Indigenous cause after visiting the village, researchers developing important work in partnership with the community, business partners who respected and valued the local artisan production. But above all, she saw her 5 children completely integrated into that universe. They were no longer the frightened, hungry children who had arrived years before. They were proud, confident young Miwok, prepared to face any challenge the future might bring. During the ceremony, Elder William, now over 80 years old but still active and wise, blessed the couple with words that touched Jennifer's heart. "May you build a family as a tree builds its roots," he said. "Deep enough to withstand the storms, but flexible enough to adapt to change. May you honor the past without being bound to it, and may you prepare for the future without forgetting to live in the present." After the ceremony, Jennifer found herself alone for a few minutes, contemplating the sunset over the thatched huts she now called home. She thought about the extraordinary journey she had taken, the twists and turns life had thrown her way, the miracles disguised as coincidences. She thought of her grandmother Dorothy, who had kept the family traditions alive even far from the village, paving the way for the family to one day return. She thought of her great-grandfather Robert, who had left the village for love, but whose descendants had returned by fate. She thought of the mining company, which unknowingly had been a catalyst for positive changes that might never have happened otherwise. She thought of all the people who had helped along the way, even when she didn't know she needed help. "Mom, are you okay?" Tyler's voice brought her back to the present. "I'm great, son. I was just thinking about how we got here. And are you happy we came?" Jennifer looked at Tyler, now almost her height, self-assured and proud of his roots. She looked at his younger siblings playing with other village children, speaking 2 languages simultaneously, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "I have no words to express how grateful I am that we found this path," she said, hugging her son. "Sometimes the best things in life come disguised as tragedies." "How so?" "If we hadn't been evicted from the apartment, we never would have ended up here. If I hadn't lost my job, I never would have discovered my true calling. If we hadn't been desperate, maybe we never would have had the courage to accept a life so different. So you think everything happened for a reason?" Jennifer considered the question carefully. She didn't want to teach her son that suffering was necessary or inevitable, but she also wanted him to understand that obstacles can turn into opportunities. "I don't think everything happens for a specific reason," she said finally. "But I think we can always find a reason in everything that happens. The difference lies in how we choose to respond to the situations we face." Years later, when her earliest memories in the village were already becoming hazy, Emma, now a teenager, would ask her mother what the decision to stay had been like. "It wasn't really a decision," Jennifer would answer. "It was a recognition. When we arrived here, I thought we were seeking temporary shelter. But what I discovered was that we were coming home. The only real decision was to stop running and accept staying where we belonged." End of story. Now tell us what you thought of this story and where you're following us from. Was there a moment that moved you the most? Share your honest impressions about Jennifer's and her children's journey. Do you believe fate guided this family back to their roots? We love reading your opinions. Don't forget to leave your like and, most importantly, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other touching stories like this one. Thank you so much for your company.